The Bowe Bergdahl bombshell. President Trump slamming the judge's ruling of no time for the deserter. He actually tweeted, "The decision on Sergeant Bergdahl is a complete and total disgrace to our country and to our military." Now to my panel, Jim Hanson, president of Security Studies, and also he served in the U.S. Army Special Forces. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Waltz, a former Green Beret commander, now a Fox News contributor, and Rebeccah Heinrichs, a fellow at the Hudson Institute. Colonel Waltz, I want to start with you. I just, when the headline came by, I was in I just couldn't believe it. I just could not believe what I was reading. I had assumed that he was going to get a lot of time. In fact, from what I understand, he was even eligible for a life sentence. Why was the judge so lenient?
Well, you know, Charles, I'm devastated. I'm devastated for my men who were baited into ambushes. I led the search for them in 2009. I'm devastated for the Navy SEAL that testified that has a life-altering injury. I'm devastated for the sergeant who can't speak or walk anymore because he was shot on a mission that he shouldn't have been on, looking for Bergdahl. Why did he get such a light sentence? Well, I think his defense attorneys did you know, they presented the case that his torture, which, by the way, we know only from Bergdahl himself, but that his torture should count for time served. And I think it's, you know, it's a travesty of justice today. Yeah, but Rebeccah, unfortunately, though, it feels like President Trump or candidate Trump weighed in on this from the judge's point of view, and it feels like another example of judicial activism. And even after the president's tweet went out, Bergdahl's attorney saying maybe he'll get the dishonorable discharge overturned because of it. It's an outrage what he did to this country, what happened to the men and women who tried to save him. And yet, this is it. I mean, the world is just left wondering how this could happen.
Right. The judge signaled earlier in the week that he was going to take into consideration President Trump's, then candidate Trump's statements during the campaign that he made against Bergdahl. So he took that into consideration. He went super lenient here. It's a miscarriage of justice. It's a disgrace. It certainly appears as though that the judge made a political decision, and he did so at the expense of justice. You talk about that Navy SEAL that is now retired. One of the things that he said was that he went looking for Bergdahl because he didn't want Bergdahl's mother to see him executed on YouTube. So they did this for the right reasons. They cared about their, you know, their comrade. They cared about what was right for the United States. It's a shame. And by the way, let us not forget that President Obama exchanged Bergdahl for these 5 high-ranking Taliban who are now in Qatar doing who knows what. And of course, these aren't repentant, sorry members of the Taliban. These are still incredibly bad guys that are conspiring against the United States. Right. So from start to finish, this was a miscarriage of justice. It was a disgrace. It is a disgrace.
You know, Jim, President Obama also talked about the courage of Bergdahl's parents, and we saw that ceremony of sorts in a rose garden, and that left a lot of people with a bad taste in their mouth. But this goes even further than that. The idea that somehow this is what we're seeing now as justice from a U.S. military judge is just beyond the pale.
You know, Charles, this judge deserted his duty to provide justice to all those who were serving honorably and not violating their oaths like Bergdahl did. You know, I'm sorry, I would never wish the kind of suffering he underwent at the hands of the Taliban on anybody, but he brought that on himself. And he did that, and he suffered. Now that judge was supposed to bring justice to the military folks who have served and give him the punishment he was supposed to get. By not doing that, he not only made all those people's oaths less valuable, but he gave a propaganda victory to our enemies by saying, we're going to just let this go, and it doesn't matter if Americans desert. Bergdahl deserved much worse than he got.
Colonel Waltz, you started by talking about your men and how you feel. We know that there's been a rebound in the esprit de corps, if you will, within the military since
right.
They're allowed to actually go out and fight and try to win these skirmishes and these battles. Could this set it back, though? Could this sort of injustice set back the morale of the men and women out there who are fighting on our behalf?
Well, it could be a setback, but these men and women, you know, as your other guest said, took an oath. They're going to abide by that oath, and they're going to live up to it. And I think they probably all agree, or the vast majority, that this is a travesty. However, I don't think the deal is completely done here, in that the convening authority, which is a 4-star General Robert Abrams, will have the final say on whether to carry the sentence forward or whether to adjust it somehow. And this was the same general who took a recommendation that it not go to court-martial at all, and then it insisted that Bergdahl go to this court-martial phase. So I do still have some faith there. But to the point of the trade, I also want to make a point that we have hostages all over the world still being held today, and all of those terrorist groups who understood before Bergdahl that we have a no concessions policy, no ransom, no trades. That's not what America does. We don't reward terrorists for taking Americans hostage. They are all now expecting a trade like the Taliban got for Bergdahl, and it's a strategic issue that his action not only hurt Americans in Afghanistan but all over the world.
Rebeccah, your final thoughts on this?
You know, he spent 5 years with the Taliban. He's got about 80 years left in a cell in the United States, as far as I'm concerned. He wasn't just captured on the battlefield fighting the enemy. He deserted his post. He deserves justice.
All right. Thank you all very, very much. Really appreciate it.